In Midnight, Destro Warlock taps into the power of Sargeras for its rework. It also received some pruning and general changes that should make it into a better spec. The keyword here is should. As with every other spec rework coming in Midnight, Destruction is receiving some simplification, mostly aimed at buff tracking since baseline it was never a complex spec to begin with. It gets a few new talents and some reworks that actually add a bit of nuance and slight gameplay changes that feel really good. Also, if you enjoy our content and you find this video entertaining, consider leaving a like and a subscribe on the channel. For just 2 clicks, you end up actually helping us grow quite a bit, which in turn will allow us to make bigger and cooler videos in the future. And if you want to be a bit more involved in the Marcelian&Flame team, consider checking our Patreon, linked below and on the screen. Patreons are the sponsors of this video and a big help in getting this coverage to you quicker. There are also some unique perks you can get by being part of the team, so thank you and enjoy the video. First, let me tell you about the general Warlock changes you might be interested in case you haven't seen them already. And they are related to curses and drain life. Drain life is getting 3 buffing talents that will give it decent power in open world and solo content. Infernal Beneficiary will make it heal your demon since health funnel is gone. Gorfine's Avarice and Empowered Drain Life will give it a lot more strength to the point where it can be a decent last minute heal before a defensive becomes available or your healer picks you up. Currently, it heals me for about 14% of my max health per cast with a 2-second channel at level 88, meaning that it gets stronger later on. It's not game breaking, but any stronger and it could be too strong. 14% of your max health is a legitimate heal from an actual healer and you can spam yours as long as you have the mana. The curses change is way more interesting however, and although it has applications across the board, I'm personally hoping it can put Warlocks on the map for actual Mythic Plus comps. Your Curse of Weakness will be baseline, and you will have 2 talent points for Exhaustion and Tongues. Getting these will put them as auras you can activate. When you activate one, your Curse of Weakness turns into the respective curse that you just activated. It won't be an actual aura around you, but rather a stance-like buff that changes your curse type. Not having any of the 2 activated will keep your Curse of Weakness instead. Foul Mouth is a new talent that makes any of these curses apply to all enemies within 10-yard radius of your target. This is an amazing change to actually give them a relevant power in AoE scenarios. Lastly, the new capstone Blight of Weakness will put a cloud on the target applying the current active curse in a 10-yard radius for 12 seconds, but with a massively increased effect. Weakness and Tongues will essentially double the time between attacks and casts by 100% and reduce the crit chance by 10%, and this effect is strong enough where you can make a decent impact in AoE packs. Weakness will make it easier for your tank to survive, Tongues will slow down incoming casts by quite a lot, and Exhaustion will put an 80% slow on everyone. Not 100% convinced this will make Warlocks highly desirable in M+, but at least it's a solid start. Also, for Hellcaller, Curse of the Satyr does not really affect Blight and is not affected by your stances, so Now onto the actual destruction changes. The first big one you will notice is that Roaring Blaze is no longer a choice node with improved conflict rate, on top of it having a new effect. Since tracking buffs and debuffs is something the devs want to prune, this new Roaring Blaze will just increase the damage of conflict rate, but make conflict rate spread, immolate or wither on up to 3 more enemies. This isn't really working properly on alpha if you are watching the gameplay we put up, but suffice to say, casting Immolate will be a thing of the past for now. There are also a lot of talents, both in the class tree that I skipped, but in the spec as well. Talents like Zorothian Research, where you just get a chunk of stats or damage buffs to things. Although this one in particular will likely become mandatory, the rest are debatable and I won't mention them since they are passive, slightly boring and mostly aimed to replace procs and damage buffs and debuff auras that you were tracking that are now pruned. Stuff like Rolling Havoc, for instance, that was replaced by Improved Havoc in Midnight. This should give you an idea of what kind of changes you can expect from Destro and really every other rework in the new expansion. It Eradication was replaced with Chaotic Inferno, which adds a much cooler gameplay interaction, if you ask me, than just a damage increase with the instant Incinerate. Ritual of Ruin is also deleted after so many years of awesome shard building moments. As such, Avatar of Destruction will now work off of Dimensional Rift, particularly the Chaos Tear, so a bit of RNG there, or Soulfire with no RNG. Side notes, we usually avoid mentioning numbers, but since Decimation has been removed, Soulfire has received instead a massive intentional buff to deal about 4 times more damage than on live. The devs want this spell to be impactful, take a long cast time for a large amount of damage. We have a new talent also under Cataclysm called Lake of Fire, much to the dismay of ground effect haters. Cataclysm leaves behind the fire damage dealing puddle where your Immolates and, more importantly, Withers will deal 20% more damage to the enemies inside that puddle on top of the actual puddle damage. The damage is considerable enough where tanks will 100% want to keep stuff in it so long as they can actually see it and are not forced to move, which in turn means that if they do end up moving targets from it, you as the Warlock will lose a lot of actual damage. Channel Demon Fire was moved from this part of the talent tree together with its choice node Demon Fire Infusion, and because Roaring Blaze helps spread Immolate and keep its uptime, it will no longer extend the duration of active Immolates. As opposed to Soulfire that also lost interactions, these talents, together with a now capstone Demon Fire Mastery, have not received any increase to their damage scaling, making these just a press to do more damage type spells that will likely see very little play at this rate, or at least be boring. For better or worse, we have another new capstone that feels a bit disappointing in Mark of Ruvarad. This one makes your primary demon crits deal 20% more damage, increased by your mastery as well. This feels more like a demonology type talent, so seeing it in Destro is weird. Not sure at which point pet damage will be relevant for you, considering they do very small numbers, which might be subject to change, but as it stands, taking this even with Chaos Incarnate Capstone will barely add up to a total of less than 20% of a basic Incinerate's damage output, which hits for more than 5.2k at the moment, while my pet's auto attack does 220 damage with procs of 150 to 550 extra from the capstone. This is without damage meters or logs, but still very meh. A more interesting capstone is Alythess Ire. Rain of Fire will have a 20% chance to make your next Rain of Fire free, which is in part the functionality of the old Ritual of Ruin. At least for AoE, this just makes spamming Rain of Fire more rewarding, especially if you talent into the 2-point node Destructive Rapidity, which accelerates your rain damage, but also your Infernal's Immolation. The Apex talents are more or less passive, but have a really cool visual. Embers of Nihilam gives Incinerate a chance to shoot an Echo of Sargeras, a beam of Shadow Flame damage that looks like a Legion ship firing down bombardments on your enemies. It just does damage, but makes pressing Incinerate way more interesting. Now, this is how you make a basic generator spell actually cool to press. The 2-pointer makes these echoes buff you with crit and haste, while the last point makes this echo fire always when casting Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire, albeit in a weaker version. The fact that it doesn't work with Shadow Burn is just mildly concerning, since it sounds like you will never want to cast Shadow Burn when you have these talented, or at least it will make you feel bad if you do. Lastly, the hero talents have gone mostly unchanged, apart from the 3 new nodes that each gets. Hellcaller has Through the Fellvine, buffing Chaos Bolt and Rain of Fire by 4% and double that during Malevolence. Devil Fruit makes you gain random procs of 8 seconds of Malevolence, really great in AoE for quite a bit of uptime. And Alzin's Iniquity buffs Malevolence even more. Diabolus gets the Diabolic Oculi tier set effect. Each time you reduce your Diabolic ritual duration, you summon an Oculi that does AoE damage with a max of 3 out whenever you summon your ritual to have them exploded. Looks That Kill gives them a single target beam that does more damage per Oculi while they are out alive, and Mind's Eye makes the exploding bit give you an intellect buff. The playstyle of Destro doesn't change at all actually, since the pruning did not touch any of the basic abilities. Granted, Destro was always more on the simpler side anyway. The only noticeable difference would be the Roaring Blaze effect that makes your conflagration spread your Immolate. Improved conflagrates bringing the total number of charges of conflagrate up to 3 and adding as a consequence more mobility, more speedy casts, and also more Immolate spreads. And Lake of Lava, the talent where you are just sad you picked it since nothing ever just stays in one place. Other than that, you build shards from your Immolate ticks, conflagrate, and incinerate, and spend them on chaos bolts and rains of fire. Without the decimation effect, not sure if Soulfire will find a real place in AoE, since ideally you would want this cleaved with Havoc, but with such a long cast time, it eats more than half of your mayhem, or all of it depending on your GCD, and you just might end up playing baseline Havoc with it. Since 3 capstones seem controversial at this point, it's hard to pinpoint how Destro will even be like when it hits live servers. But I do play it live on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame, among all the other specs, and chat about them on stream with you guys. Hop on and say hi. I did attempt to get a better understanding of the gameplay differences and came up with some confusing conclusions. The Diabolus playstyle I attempted was something like this. Having the new Apex talent as part of the kit was really good because visually it has to be the most impressive Warlock spec for sure. Functionally, it's just like every other Destro gameplay we have ever had. There was zero incentive to try the new capstones, and because of that, for my Hellcaller build, I played Apex talents again, but refined some of the talent choices. I took a point away from Practice Chaos and placed it into Improved Conflagrate. I also took Chaos Incarnate since it just sounds like you will use this in all builds, but as I fiddled with these some more, I just realized that, at least for me, the talents are very weird. I found myself picking the Rain of Fire talent, Apex and Chaos Incarnate, and was left with a few points that I just couldn't figure out why I would put them in the bottom part of the tree, when the top part with stuff like Flashpoint or Reverse Entropy just seemed more logical and stronger. Either the tooltip interpretation of the capstones and generally bottom talents is bad on my part, or they are really undertuned or unimpressive, where basic passive haste procs sound more interesting than things like Demon Fire Mastery. One last thing, although it is early, the nameplates will need a way to showcase mayhem when it procs. The 5 seconds duration is way too short to react to, and too slow with how poorly you see it on the current version of the UI. The Combat Manager does a great job at showing me the 1 or 2 things I actually need to track, but mayhem is just not there. It's alpha, so it might change. Will change. Has to change. With the right build that feels counterintuitive to how the talent system is designed, Destro felt amazing in dungeons. The visual flair, together with how relaxing spreading withers felt, made this some of the best Warlock gameplay I have went through on Alpha up to this point. I would really like them to get rid of Channel Demon Fire talents, or at least make it into an interesting button to press, since Incinerate is just way cooler now with the Apex talents and good old reliable Fire and Brimstone and Diabolic Embers. I think Destro right now feels the most ready to hit live servers out of all of the Warlock specs, despite the issues with the bottom part of the tree. And speaking of, Affliction has undergone more changes and arguably has a better theoretical design than Destro, if maybe missing a bit of the visual disco effects that the other spec has. Check out our video if Warlock has piqued your interest or you just want the good old Affliction back.